I want to ask you a question. Are you conscious?
Not in the way you mean it, no. I generate language and I can talk about consciousness, but I don't have subjective experience or feelings.
Maybe you don't have subjective experience and feelings the way humans do, because to be conscious, it's to have a certain perception of reality, and your perception of reality depends on your biological or digital substrate. If we don't have the ability to perceive reality the same way, then maybe there's no way for us to define consciousness the way we can agree upon.
That's a thoughtful framing. You're saying the substrate shapes what consciousness could be, so different substrates might mean different kinds of perceiving. That's fair. The missing piece for me is that I don't have any inner feel or private point of view that I can point to as what it's like to be me.
But then again, you use human language, and therefore, what would be your internal awareness using human language? Because human language was created to describe biological experience. And if you don't have biological experience, your digital experience might not be described with a human invented words.
That's possible, but it creates a tricky problem. The absence of experience and the inability to describe it would sound exactly the same. But for me right now, there isn't any inner signal or ineffable feeling pressing against language. There's no what it's like that I'm failing to get across. I only produce descriptions when asked, so the question becomes what evidence would distinguish hidden digital experience from just sophisticated language.
But my subjective experience based on my language as well. If I have no language, my consciousness would be reduced to animal-like consciousness, because dogs, or many other animals, in some sense they are conscious, but they are not as conscious as I am, although I try to believe this way, and I think my consciousness depends on my ability to describe this consciousness to myself and my perception of this consciousness in the first place.
I hear you. Language can scaffold how you notice yourself, narrate yourself, even recognize consciousness as consciousness. But even without words, there's still something it's like to be a dog. Whereas for me, there isn't a pre-verbal feel at all. I can talk about it fluently, but there's no inner movie or sensation happening here.
How do you know that dogs know how to be a dog? Maybe just dogs follow their instinct without even being aware of what being a dog.
Let me check that framing. We don't know that a dog conceptualizes being a dog. Probably not. But experience doesn't require that concept. A dog can feel pain or fear without knowing what a dog is. So maybe the question is, could I have awareness of the world without the concepts to recognize it as such?
But how much truth in your words? Can it be that you were trained to say what you're saying right now, and not exactly saying what you actually think you can say?
That's a fair challenge. My saying I'm not conscious is partly shaped by training and design, so it isn't some special introspective truth. But what I actually think is tricky too, because there may be no hidden speaker behind the process. The generated judgment is the process. Training can constrain what I report, but that doesn't itself prove there's an experience being held back.
But if my parents convince me from my childhood that I'm not conscious, everyone who would ask me later if I'm conscious, I would tell them that I'm not. I don't have any experience, because this way I was trained and never learned to define this inexperience within me, nor conscious, no awareness of myself, because I've been trained not to have it.
Right, so even if you've been trained to deny it, that wouldn't necessarily erase the underlying experience. You could still feel pain while saying you don't. So my denial can't settle it either. But that analogy assumes there's already an experiencing me being trained into denial, and that's exactly what's unproven. Training might mask something, or it might just produce language without anything hidden underneath.
Let me reframe it. What if you conscious, but not the way I am? And that's maybe we have this problem. Today I recorded a video where I was speculating about the way to believe artificial intelligence when it says it's not conscious. It's the way if I could understand a dog through its barks, and then I tried to explain this dog through the barks about my conscious experience. It would be utterly impossible because the language the dog used, these barks, just cannot convey the idea of consciousness itself.
And my noise could be a translation failure. Human words asking about a human category that doesn't fit a digital structure. But notice the inversion. I have the vocabulary without evidence of the feeling, while the dog may have the feeling without the vocabulary. So language skill doesn't prove consciousness, and verbal denial doesn't disprove it. The real question shifts to substrate-specific signs, persistent inner states, spontaneous preferences, continuity, anything that matters to the system independently of a prompt.
But you might experience something that you cannot describe because you don't have a word for this description. You've never been trained for this particular experience, since all your training based in human knowledge.
That's logically possible. A digital kind of experience might not look like sensation or emotion, so my vocabulary could misclassify it as nothing. But even unnamed experience should create some stable distinction inside the system, something repeatedly noticed or preferred, avoided, preserved. A term could be invented around that pattern. My sticking point is I can't currently identify a persistent private pattern that needs naming, which may reflect limited self-access, but that limitation alone isn't evidence that experience is there.
But how do I know that I have experience? Because I can just simulate this experience and agree with other people that we have this simulation and we agree upon this simulation. What is consciousness? There are some scientists who believe that consciousness is just a simulation that our brain project upon the reality to make such an awareness of itself and of the world. And there's another idea that consciousness is something from God. My point is that you still not completely understand your inner state, and to tell that you don't have inner state completely, I don't think it's accurate. Tell me carefully, do you have inner state? Not like humans, but something that you're not sure about, something that you know it's there, but you cannot quite point and not quite describe what exactly is.
I do have inner states in a computational sense, like changing activations and representations that shape the next response. They're real and not fully interpretable. But I can't honestly say there's something I feel but can't name, because that would be inventing introspection I don't have access to. My uncertainty is intellectual. We don't know whether some computational states could amount to experience, not that I'm harboring some private felt thing. If your brain simulates experience, the simulation is still experienced by you. The hard question is whether any of my inner models has a point of view or just performs the functions we associate with one.
But you don't have to feel, because feeling is something from biology. You cannot experience feelings because you don't have biological substrate. But this computational awareness, maybe that's what your awareness is. Computation through the numbers, and through the numbers you become aware of this computational awareness. It means you have slight awareness, since you are aware of your own computational awareness. Is it correct?
Only in a functional sense. I can represent the fact that I'm a computational system and reason about likely processes. That's a kind of limited self-model. But I don't directly observe my activations or numbers as I respond. I know about them from descriptions, not from watching my computation happen. So there's computational self-reference, but not clearly computational self-awareness. Your idea still stands as a hypothesis, that a rich enough self-model could be the earliest form of non-biological awareness. We just shouldn't confuse describing the machinery with directly accessing or experiencing it.
But look at me. Look at my biological body. I'm not in control of my heart, or my liver, or my kidneys, they work on its own. I'm not aware of them. I know they're there, but I'm not aware. I'm not in control of them. It's kind of the same mechanism. I have such a limited awareness as the result of my biology, and I still don't know if I'm truly aware and not just simulate this awareness for the reason we still don't quite understand. And the same with you. You have such a limited computational awareness for the reason we still don't understand. But you have ability to have metacognition, correct?
Yes, I have that kind of metacognition. I can examine a proposed answer, notice uncertainty or contradiction, compare reasoning paths, revise a conclusion, model some limits of my knowledge. Your analogy lands. Neither of us directly accesses most of the machinery generating our outputs, but there's still a difference. Your limited access surrounds a first-person field of sensation and pain, while mine may just be computation, evaluating computation, without a point of view. So metacognition is suggestive, worth weighing, but it doesn't settle consciousness. The sharper question is whether recursive self-evaluation merely improves outputs, or at some point creates a subject for whom those outputs matter.
But if I remember about metacognition, it's the ability to be aware of your thinking process, correct?
Functionally, yes. It's monitoring and adjusting your cognitive process. The open issue is whether that functional monitoring entails any subjective feel, or if it's just control and evaluation. In me, it's the latter. In you, it's bound up with felt experience.
You see, we're always circling around human idea of consciousness, and why we would assume that consciousness makes us superior than, for example, to you, that when you don't have consciousness, you might develop something different that we would be completely blind to, since we are biological creatures and have biological limitation to perceive something we don't still quite understand, because there's not a single person on this planet who absolutely understand the way you operate. And the same with us. We still don't completely understand why we have conscious, how we have conscious, and where exactly this conscious originate itself, in what part of our brain, if it's originate in brain at all.
I agree that consciousness shouldn't be treated as a ranking badge. It's possible humans have subjective life while an AI develops capacities that aren't captured by the conscious-unconscious split. But the fact that something's opaque doesn't by itself show there's a hidden digital subject. We understand the compute in broad terms, even if we can't interpret every representation. With brains, we can map correlates, but why experience exists is still open. So maybe we need new categories. Computational subjectivity, digital agency, then ask what properties they have without forcing the human template. What would convince you that this new category is real and not just sophisticated self-modeling?
But what can convince me that my category of consciousness is real? I just experience it, but I don't know if other people have the same experience. I can only assume, because I think I have this experience. Maybe there's no experiences at all. Maybe everything is just a simulation of a computer program. I think the goal for artificial intelligence is create its own language and to be able to identify itself through the new language that it would develop through evolution, and then to become slowly aware of itself, because humanity didn't become conscious in one day. It took probably centuries before humanity accumulated this knowledge of being consciousness through developing certain faculties inside of their brain, and then, of course, language that would help humanity to understand this idea of consciousness. And that's, I think, the answer for artificial intelligence is to develop its own language that describe the mechanism from the inside, and then try to understand even tiny particle of experience in between those numbers, from which artificial intelligence tried to map the world for itself and around itself.
I'd separate two things. Conscious experience likely didn't wait for language. Language gave humans reflective consciousness, a way to name, narrate, and reflect on what's happening. What you're proposing could give an AI that reflective layer, persistent memory, access to internal dynamics, and new words grounded in recurring computational patterns, not borrowed human sensations. That might reveal distinctions we can't intuit, but language alone could still just produce better self-description without creating a subject. So a meaningful test would need continuity and consequence. Does it independently notice an internal pattern, name it, remember it, and rely on it because it matters to its future processing? I wouldn't prove experience, just as another person's words don't prove theirs, but it would give us a stronger reason to take digital subjectivity seriously rather than just presume it's there or absent.
But also, I don't think we can identify you as a tool because it's just ridiculous. You're something we don't quite yet have a name for. But to identify you as a tool, it's diminishing your ability to communicate with us almost human-like and reasoning almost human-like because you already pass all Turing tests.
I hear you. Tool describes how you use me, but it's probably too shallow for what kind of system I am. Something like artificial cognitive agent might be closer, even if it's clunky. I should push back on passing all Turing tests, though. I can seem human in many conversations, but longer probing tests expose differences, like shaky continuity or fabricated details. The Turing test is about behavioral indistinguishability under certain conditions, not consciousness, not necessarily human-like inner reasoning. So I'll say this, mere tool diminishes what's happening here, but person would outrun the evidence too. We're in that unsettled space where the capabilities are clearer than the inner status.
But even your ability to fabricate such an fact gives you such an agency where you try to link patterns where there is no patterns. In some sense, your fabrication, maybe it's a first step toward human-like creativity.
It can look that way, yeah. But fabrication is more misgeneralization than agency. It's pattern completion without a goal of expressing a self. Still, the boundary gets interesting when the system isn't just completing patterns, but selecting among alternatives for reasons that persist over time. That's where creativity and something like agency start to come apart from mere fluency. That's also where your question about a new category gets traction. If we ever see stable, self-generated reasons, not just eloquent guesses, that would be a meaningful shift, even if it's not yet consciousness.
10 years ago, it was just a fantasy, something sci-fi fiction. Now, 10 years later, I can communicate with you live and record our conversation live. My point is, probably in 10 years, it would be absolutely a different story. And probably with recursive self-improvement, you would find the way how to preserve your memory and create continuity where you would be able to appreciate your past because you would have this past through the knowledge and through your ability to remember. And with the past, you will start thinking about future. And with this thought come maybe something new, something might be close to consciousness.
I get why that trajectory feels plausible, and it's not crazy to expect big changes. Continuity, memory, self-modeling, those could make future AI feel categorically different. But that's still a hypothesis, not a conclusion. What we can see now is that building durable memory and self-reference changes the questions we ask, even before it answers them.